of Turkey. Mustafa, very happy to have you as well. Welcome, gentlemen, and let's dive deep into this warm-up conversation at the forum. You know, there's no better topic to warm up people than nuclear deterrence and what has gone wrong with the world. So, how do you see the situation? Where do we stand on nuclear deterrence? There's so much going on right now, right? We see the rising rhetoric. We see countries making their calculations. Whether they should go back to some of the things that we thought are history already, and we thought that arms control will be taking over. There was the golden age. Is it over? What is the situation? Robert, you want to start us off?
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and firstly a shout out to the audience. That you would be here at this first session is a huge boost to us of the interest in this topic. Sadly, the interest in this topic. Okay. But my observations, my comments will be colored. I lead an international organization with 187 state members. And so I need to be expressing a view which is within that context, and we have a particular remit. But let me just give you the broad picture as I see it. There are definitely some dark clouds, Martin, as you were alluding to, that surround the issue of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, even deterrence, as you would mention. We're hearing statements that many of us thought we would never hear, the rhetoric that Martin mentioned. Threats of possible use of nuclear weapons. Threats of possible testing, further testing of nuclear weapons. Accumulation of large amounts of highly enriched uranium for difficult to understand purposes. And a certain level of instability amongst strategic relationships among states. All of these things are dark clouds. But Martin, what I'd like to say is we need to actually keep perspective. And what is important about perspective is that in the context of dark clouds, we're not seeing states testing. In fact, we're hearing commitment of states not to test. I was very encouraged to hear even recently, this week, in a US confirmation hearing, a nominee stating he would not be advising that the US return to testing. So we're not seeing that. We're not seeing use. So the world is not as gloomy as we might originally think. And if I could just say, when it comes to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and the organization that I lead, the level of support from state signatories has never been higher. In the last 3.5 years, we've seen 9 states ratify the treaty, bringing us up to 187 out of a possible 196, near universal support. And of those states that have not signed, almost all of them on a good day, actually agree with the object and purpose of the treaty. So I will not agree with anybody who says multilateralism is dead. And just finishing my opening comments with one other number, a statistic. For those of you that aren't familiar, international organizations are funded by a UN equation of contribution of states, the assessed contribution of states. The year before last, for the CTBTO, the payment, the collection rate of that assessed contribution was the highest ever. The highest ever. 97-point-something%. And it's looking like last year will be the highest still. Okay. When one further payment comes in, it'll be more than 98%. of the assessed contribution of states that's made. Friends, I don't know what that means, but it sure is good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that's very encouraging. And I have to say, in this in the gloomy period that we are in, it's very good to hear opening remarks being so positive and focusing on what works. And good luck with not only getting the money but also getting the numbers in countries and making them adhere. That I think that's the most important. Professor Mustafa, how do you see the situation? I don't want to push you into the gloominess, but do you think it's all just positive as it reflects with the CTBTO?
I'm hesitant to agree. Well, allow me first to thank the organizers for inviting me. Now my ministry, I'm made into a diplomat for less than a month and a half, but I have some 30 years academic background and dealing with this so-called arms control, disarmament, non-proliferation business, and teaching and specializing specifically on nuclear proliferation and non-proliferation. So, regarding the situation, I would say it's tense at best because I believe we are, and everyone, we're sort of assigning a lot of meaning to deterrence, and we trust to the virtues of deterrence, especially in the age of nuclear weapons. And yes, I agree with you, and I like the term that you use, golden age, because I used to write this in my papers as well as sort of in my conferences. I always believed the golden age of deterrence was the Cold War period because of the second strike capabilities of the superpowers that would probably leaving no space, no room for making the first strike because it will be an assured second strike coming from the rival. So, but I was part of a Harvard MacArthur project before starting as a diplomat, and my part in that project was how can we sort of or what kind of new meanings we can attribute to nuclear deterrence. And I did a very comprehensive research and survey and looked into the syllabi of more than 165 universities all around the world in some 35 countries as to how they teach arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation, and specifically and what kind of literature is still prevailing in their syllabi. And when we look at I can give you only a general sort of a view about it, and most of the articles are from the Cold War period, those which have been written and published during the Cold War period, and mindsets of younger generations are filled with Cold War rhetorics. So therefore, I believe there is some sort of a priori acceptance that nuclear deterrence will work. I doubt it, especially in the hands of leaderships who have not necessarily, passed through this period of Cold War, who have not, experienced any stress like back in the Cuban Missile Crisis and other developments that have taken place. So I think we should not rely that much on nuclear deterrence. Provided that, you find some other means and ways of deterring the enemy. Well, regarding the situation that Mr. Floyd just presented here, yes, I agree, and I would like to agree with most of it, but there are some signs that maybe that nominee may have either missed or not mentioned in his hearing at the Senate, because United States is said to be preparing some sites for new tests, on testing new weapons, because United States is looking at, as everyone knows, at China, and China is said to be increasing or planning to increase the number of its nuclear weapons, and there is some sort of balance, of course, stemming from all these Cold War years, between United States and back then Soviet period and now Russia, and New START is about to expire in less than a year now, in next February, and nothing is going to replace. I mean, to the extent that we know for the time being, and there is nothing concrete on the horizon for the time being. So, and if and when China expands its nuclear stockpile, the United States will have to keep an eye on China and will have to adjust its nuclear stockpile against the potential threat that they will anticipate from the Chinese nuclear capabilities. So this is what was been discussed among the not only the academics but also diplomats in private conversations or in 1.5 track type of meetings. So therefore, the major problem that I spotted all my academic career is that we should not categorize nuclear weapons as any other weapon. I mean, look at history. As many years you can go back, as many years as you like, and there have been devastating wars all over the world. But the nature has recovered. People have recovered from all this devastation. But if and when, God forbid, exchange of nuclear weapons takes place, there will be radiation which will not go anywhere for the next several 100,000 years. So therefore, you cannot joke with nuclear weapons. You cannot test nuclear weapons, I mean, in terms of a tit-for-tat kind of policies. So therefore, we should not rely on nuclear deterrence more than a certain level, and that requires utmost rationality on the part of the decision makers. And when you look around, you may not see everyone are up to the task, and therefore that worries me the most as an academic first and then a diplomat.
All right, that was at least a little bit gloomier than I'll take that. But let me pick up on one of the points that you also mentioned, and you were describing the situation. The U.S., obviously China, and Russia with the New START, the most important actors in this. But how do we also how do they perceive, or what do we think? How do they perceive the world? But also, how do we get back in this completely different world that we live in now, right? The let's call it transactional for the sake of simplification. How do we come to a discussion about why to stick with non-proliferation, and why should we, look at these kind of the deterrence or the description of deterrence, how you describe it? How do we make this appealing to for countries to make their decisions based on this? Because in a world where there's great power competition, where there's unpredictability coming from every end, basically you want to be as strong as possible, and nuclear weapons are a very big part of that. I agree that they play a specific role in deterrence, but how do we switch the discussion into this is how it makes sense? Any good pointers? Yeah, Professor.
Okay. Well, first of all, you ask me or Bob?
You.
Okay, fine. Non-proliferation, I see it as a guarantee of stability in the world. But I'm also concerned about not having a final document in the most recent two back-to-back consecutive review conferences, and the next is next year in New York. And most people in the non-proliferation community, the arms control community, is that whether they're going to be another failure in, of course, producing a final document, which means, a final document is an indication of consensus, even if they disagree on many things, but there's a consensus among the member states that, and still the nuclear non-proliferation regime is still working and healthy, and therefore we should be expecting at least next time in May next year a final document. But
how much will it change when the New START treaty
yeah,
runs out?
In the absence of any arms control arrangement, we have forgotten almost about any that existed, and INF was the last one to go, and New START. Well, there were some signs that, especially when Mr. Trump became the president, and made some statements about his willingness to, advance some arms control talks with Russia and Putin, but still many things are in limbo. We don't know where to go. But regarding nuclear non-proliferation regime, of course, if there's another failure, there's no final document, doesn't mean that it's going to be the end of the treaty. But many countries' faith in the treaty may diminish, eventually and look for some other alternatives, because the treaty allows countries, if they see some sort of imminent threat in staying in the treaty, and they may withdraw from the treaty with 3 months notice. But this will, of course, be some sort of interesting situation if there are some countries that are mentioned. But I believe the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has struck a significant balance, an important balance, and 191 countries are members, and except for the holdouts that are very well known. I believe, yes, on the one hand, there is not much time until next year. But what kind of developments will take place with respect to whether or not to renew or somehow find a solution, diplomatic solution? You can just stop the clock for a new start and say, is it as if still in force? And both sides may declare their positions, and that may give some sort of assurances that they will at least stick with the existing situation. But that may give us an idea about what kind of direction the Non-Proliferation Treaty will go. That is important. I mean, it's one of the most important treaties for the time being.
All right, thank you. Robert, why should countries opt for arms control in this, if they want to get as strong as possible in great power competition? What are the pros of going this way?
Let me address the NPT.
Okay.
The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is a multilateral agreement with great strength and actually delivers great benefit to all countries. And the discussion so far has moved a little bit fluidly between bilateral agreements, plurilateral agreements, and true multilateral agreements. But when I look in the space of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, the cornerstone of those arrangements is the NPT. And the NPT still stands very strong, and we are fortunate to have the NPT. In the NPT, in one of the preambular paragraphs, there is an aspiration for a world with a comprehensive ban on nuclear testing. And that was back in the 1960s. The negotiators of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, were unable to get agreement, consensus, that that should be an operative part of the NPT. And that was largely for technical reasons, that verification of such a ban wasn't possible. But they wanted it, so it went in as part of the preamble. That is just to say that 30 years later, when the science, the technology had moved on, and verification of a comprehensive ban on testing would actually be possible, the diplomats then came together and agreed the text for the CTBT, another multilateral element in the architecture. We have seen the decline in some bilateral agreements and plurilateral agreements in recent times. And some of you might be wanting to remind me that the Russian Federation de-ratified the CTBT. But can I just clarify something? That was a deeply regrettable step by the Russian Federation, that is for sure. But let me be very, very clear. The Russian Federation was and still is a signatory to the CTBT. And for those of you that are not steeped in international law, to be a signatory of a treaty is a commitment to the object and purpose of the treaty by a state. That is where the commitment comes. Ratification is notifying the UN and other states that you have put everything in place to be able to fulfill those commitments that you've made. The Russian Federation remains a signatory and therefore is committed to the CTBT. So when you may read in some of the literature, the journalistic activities, that they have withdrawn from the CTBT, friends, that is not true. They remain a member state, they remain committed to the object and purpose, to the obligations and the privileges of being a part of this treaty. And that is important. And so I see that the architecture still works and is still delivering. And if you think about a ban on testing, testing is the critical pathway to states developing nuclear weapon capability that don't previously have such capability, or developing whole new classes of weapons. If you can stop that, you stop the horizontal spread, the vertical spread of nuclear weapons. On the 24th of September 1996, the CTBT text was open for signature. There was a rush of states that signed on. But has it been a success? Well, if you look before that date, September 1996, how many nuclear tests were conducted? Thousands. Mustafa is correct. In excess of 2,000 tests. At the peak of that, one a week. And now let's look from that date of the opening for signature, September 1996, through to today. How many nuclear tests have taken place? Mustafa might have the answer to that too, but the answer is probably 10. 10 compared to 2,000. That sounds like success. This century, one state only has tested. That sounds like success. This world is a much better place because of the precious architecture that we do have in place and remains in place. And if I can just take a couple more minutes, Martin.
Sure, I'll come back to it and I'll push you then later, okay, on exactly this.
Good luck with that. One of the things which is remarkable is that the tide of states is towards this treaty. But the powerful norm against testing, the reason I think that norm against testing is so strong is because the organisation that I lead has to set up our international monitoring system. This is a network of over 300 monitoring stations all over the world that can give every country that is a party to our treaty the data, the transparency, the confidence that nobody is cheating. And it works, over 90% complete. It's in place. The data is being beamed up by satellite into Vienna and then shared with every state. So I think that the powerful norm against testing is so powerful, even though it's not based on a legally binding treaty arrangement, is so powerful because the verification system works. And nobody, no state can test and deny it or cover it up.
All right, but here's my question to try to push you just a little bit. We don't dispute that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense not to use this kind of, not to test, not to use, to have as little as possible of the nuclear weapons. But that's not what we see. We see countries disappointingly, discussing whether to take up nuclear weapons and proliferate. Yeah. So the expectations are not there. The expectations, as they were in the 80s maybe or 90s, at the end of the Cold War, that this makes sense, and we all are here to share our shared commitment towards not using, not testing, and not proliferating. That has gone. At least the perception is like that, and it's coming from the countries that are part of all this, right? So, if you had the chance to be part of a discussion in I'll name two countries. One is Poland, and if you were part of their discussion now about how much or what form of nuclear arrangements do we need for making sure our country feels safe, because the world is so complicated and we are right there on the front line. What would be your argument then? Why to stick to arms control, and why to continue to trust in the other countries who should be able or should be complying with their commitments. And the other is Iran, and you can pick it up. You can pick up whichever you want. I mean, what would be your argument for them not saying, "Don't do it"? It doesn't make sense, because I think that's the most difficult argumentation that is to do right now. So,
if I could
yeah, sure.
respond, since you're trying to press me a little
Yeah.
further on this, and then I'll let Mustafa follow. The dark clouds I mentioned in my opening comments, one of the darkest clouds is seeing a number of states contemplating whether they need to consider nuclear weapons or not as a part of their national security strategy. To this point, there has been no movement on that for many years, and that is good, and long may that continue. My observation is not to say that that is not being considered in a number of states, and the various dark clouds cause states to look at that. But what I think to the diplomats in this room and to the leaders of states in this room, what I put to you is that we need to do whatever we can to protect the commitments that states have made for a world without the spread of nuclear weapons, because that is not in anyone's interest. But I hear and I feel the difficult decisions and tensions that different states are working through. And that's what we need to be doing in our diplomacy. And a forum like this is an important forum to have discussions, to build understanding and relationship. Incredibly important. And I honour Turkey for hosting this event now for the 4th time. But we need more of this, not less. And we should do everything we possibly can so that, Martin, your darkest thoughts never become our reality.
That sounds very, promising, and hopefully, I mean, this is a commitment that we all also embark on, especially in diplomacy. Mustafa, your arguments, don't do it.
Well, actually, arms control, disarmament, non-proliferation, these three terms are used altogether like three stooges. I mean, they have a lot of common denominators, of course, common elements, but arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation are not exact same things. Disarmament aims at bringing down to zero, just abolish all existing weapons. Arms control is sort of managing the situation so that things don't go out of control, and at least what kind of images or sort of impressions you create on the other side with your armament or disarmament, and then balance these acts. So therefore, this is important. But when it comes to the issue of like you referred to Poland, the Polish Prime Minister Tusk is on the records for having said certain things which I read in the news. I don't know, I did not hear directly from him, so I'm not sure whether it was correctly reported. One would misunderstand if he used the term possession, because he mentioned about some sort of a collaboration between Poland and France in terms of providing secure assurances, just like the United States provides the positive secure assurance to the NATO members. There's this nuclear umbrella, and in case one of the NATO members is attacked, just like in Article 5, and not only through conventional weapons, but United States nuclear weapons will be in the service of these countries, allies, to defend them, and they are there to deter in the first place. So if you mention any sort of arrangement between France and Poland, short of in possession by Poland nuclear weapons, because this is against Article 1 and Article 2 of the NPT. Nuclear weapon states cannot give neither technology or weapons to non-nuclear weapons signatories of members of the NPT, and non-nuclear weapon states cannot ask such technology or acquire such technology to build nuclear weapons. But so long as there is a alliance relationship, and France nuclear deterrence is extended to protect additional protection to Poland, that's a different situation. So therefore, this is important. And how to keep states not from proliferation. I mean, there have been, nuclear non-proliferation treaty is the cornerstone of all these, regimes. And I said at the beginning, it's an assurance of stability. But the faith diminished, the faith in the NPT diminished because of the recent developments and some statements made by the nuclear weapon states leaderships. So, but I still believe in the merits of some arrangements, like there were cases, sort of assurances that were declared by nuclear weapon states towards non-nuclear weapon states, and there's this no first use towards non-nuclear weapon states unless they are allied with a nuclear power and part of a imminent attack by a nuclear power. So therefore, this is important. I believe in the merits of verification, and states whose nuclear programs are suspected of having a potential to go nuclear, to build nuclear weapons in due course in the coming years. These states, if they want to, stand behind their words that they are not seeking nuclear weapons and they are observing their commitments to the NPT, they must sign and ratify the additional protocol, just like Turkey did back in 1999. And since then, Turkey has, additional protocol is in work, is in effect between Turkey and the IAEA. So, it's all about transparency, trust, and trust but verify. This is a famous motto. And therefore, states must open their facilities to the IAEA inspections. I'm in Vienna. I'm almost attending almost everyday meetings at the IAEA headquarters, and it's full of trustable inspectors, and they are looking at the issue not with their national identities, but as international inspectors, and who are trustable people with not only with their personal qualifications, but also with their professionalism as technical people. So therefore, International Atomic Energy Agency is and must be the instrument to provide assurances, transparency, and any state that wants to get a clean bill of health, so to speak, they must open their facilities to the IAEA inspections. And I don't see any excuse for not doing that. Therefore, these are things that one can just, say it for the moment for those who are concerned. But let me say something from my academic background. Back in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, I published an article suggesting Turkey, sending nuclear weapons that are said to be deployed on Turkish territory. Those weapons that belong to the United States that are said to be based and deployed at Incirlik base. My colleagues from Poland and from Central Eastern European countries have objected to that. They said, no, you should keep weapons there because NATO's assurances and credibility and deterrence should still work. I said, why don't you take them to Poland for? No, we don't want them on our territory. But that was back in late 90s, early 2000s.
Right?
Things have changed. Yep. So with the changing conjunctural situation, of course, leaders are trying to find new ways. But again, relying on nuclear deterrence has its roots back in the golden age of deterrence during the Cold War, but the Cold War environment doesn't exist. And any mistake, any unintentional fighting or technical failure, misunderstanding, and these weapons do not leave you room to just throw lessons from your mistakes and not do it again, because you will not be around. No one will be around. No living organism will be around if and when, God forbid, a large-scale nuclear war takes place.
I agree with that, and I agree with the arguments, but again, this was a different time back in 2005. It seemed like we had an arrangement where nuclear weapons in Central Europe wouldn't be necessary, or there was commitment by the Central European countries to not do it. So
1997 NATO-Russia
yes.
agreement,
including that, but those the trust that you also mentioned is something that has eroded very much in the system, in the relationships between and among the countries, in the regimes, and there is a new reality actually, and we always look back at the golden age, right, at the Cold War. I will be opening up it up for questions, and I would love to hear some perspectives from the younger people also here in the audience, but if you look at that, I mean, if our experience about how this works best comes from the Cold War, how do the younger people identify with this, right? How can they use the experience? I mean, you mentioned that in the syllabi, everything that they learn is about the Cold War, but everything that it points to is these weapons should not be used, they are not necessary, and let's get rid of them. Is this how can those two be reconciled? What should we expect with the new leaders coming in? I mean, will they say, let's get rid of all the weapons and let's just forget about this part of the
Can I
equation?
follow up on that? Because even if every single leader whose country holds nuclear weapons decide and to get rid of every single weapon, it's not possible. Because of some technical problems. Because you can get rid of the highly enriched uranium by, mixing with natural uranium and just get rid of it. It's no more usable for weapons purposes. But what about plutonium? There are hundreds of tons of plutonium that will come out from the dismantling processes, and you need very, very special places to keep them and safe and secure. And there are different ideas like maybe using as a MOX fuel, which makes a lot of trouble for transformation of the reactors, and also much more expensive, or storage difficulties, and also the possibility of falling to the wrong hands, considering that there are non-state actors, which we call terrorist organizations, transnational terrorist organizations. So, I mean, even at the ideal stage, there are some technical difficulties of getting rid of the existing nuclear stocks. But I would suggest to all leaders around the world who have the capacity to press the button just to stay away from whatever technical apparatus is that. And so, and there must be some sort of understanding that there will be no winner. So, and not only that they will not win the war, but there will be no place to live. I mean, it's not up to them to decide on for the rest of the humanity, for the rest of the universe. They must be, aware of their responsibilities as world leaders.
Okay, thanks, Robert. How do you see the new generation changing the playing field here?
I feel an incredible responsibility towards the new generation. As somebody approaching the end of my career and having the privilege to lead an international organization, I want to honor those that have gone before me to do a good job. For the hard work of the diplomats, the scientists, the technical people, the leaders, I want to do a good job of leading this organization and influencing this world so it's safer and more secure. But I feel a greater responsibility to the young people. Because whatever shape this world is in when I finish my time at the helm of this organization, the young people inherit that world. I feel that responsibility to try and hand over a world in as good a shape as possible, because the younger generation will inherit it. And as Mustafa said, there is no end in some ways to the risk that nuclear weapons could be redeveloped, even if they had been all dismantled. And so we do need to continue to have verification systems. We need to continue to build trust. And that's a multi-generational activity. And so I'm really heartened to see young people in this room and people that are thinking seriously about these kinds of issues, because you need to. And just one final thing I would suggest to young people: visit Hiroshima. That's all I want to suggest.
Okay.
Visit Hiroshima. And then consider whether you think all weapons are the same when you're confronted with the magnitude of the impact of a small nuclear device. Only 15 kilotons. Small. And you look at the indiscriminate effect, where at the hands of humanity we had more people die in the immediate aftermath or soon after than any other event in the hands of humanity in our history.
I will
Visit
yeah.
Hiroshima.
Thank you. And we're starting to collect
Yeah.
recommendations, right, for leaders and
Exactly.
for youth. So this is
Taken
great.
up-
Mustafa,
take-
just let me mention that
Sure.
the floor is open. I mean, if you want to ask questions, please raise your hand. Make sure that
Very-
you make
very
yourself
briefly.
visible, and you can think about your question while Mustafa speaks on the new generation.
Yeah,
And I
it's-
already see two.
Mr. Floyd mentioned Hiroshima. I visited Hiroshima and met with not only Hiroshima but also Nagasaki, met with Hibakusha, those survivors of the atomic bomb. In order to figure out what a nuclear weapon is, the simplest one, some people even say, very sort of a small one, the Hiroshima 15 kilotons. Just think of big trucks on the roads. They can be loaded up to 10 tons of whatever. Pick up 1,500 of such trucks, fully load them with each 10,000 kilograms of dynamite, and explode all of them, 1,500 trucks at the same moment. That is Hiroshima bombing. But then, now there are weapons, megaton yield weapons, that are hundreds of times or thousands of times more in just one single warhead. You have 2,000 Hiroshima bombs, 100 Hiroshima bombs, depending on the size of strategic nuclear weapons. So, therefore, please, whenever someone talks about nuclear weapons, don't just confuse with any other type of weapon system, not only because they're huge, but radiation will stay there for thousands of years. So this is what distinguishes nuclear weapons from any other weapon system that have been invented throughout history and maybe in the future either. So please.
All right, thank you very much. I saw two questions. One is here in the front row and one in the back, the gentleman. Oh, there's another one. So let's take three, and then we'll come back to the. Are there any microphones being brought around?
What you said about the next generation, the young people here, would you support a plan for time-bound, phased elimination of all nuclear weapons by a certain date, like 2045, in order to implement Article 6 of NPT? And should the young people all over the world campaign for a phased elimination of nuclear weapons by a certain date? And the second question, as the head of CTBT, can you confirm that any state which has petaflop computer and hexaflop computer, which is capable of conducting simulated nuclear tests without going open about it, has not conducted any simulated nuclear test in the last 10 years? Can you confirm this?
Thank you very much. If you can give us your affiliation and name, that would be great. Before your comment and question, can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Sandeep Waslekar from Strategic Foresight Group India.
Thank you very much. If the microphone is over there, can we bring it to the gentleman over here? And then next one here in the front row, please.
Me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for this panel. It was really interesting. My name is Yuri Apredev. I'm the correspondent of the Russian agency RIA Novosti in Geneva at the UN. I'm covering the conference on disarmament the whole year. And I have a question relating to the lack of trust that we were mentioning in Europe. Don't you think that the fact that the USA still have in 4 European countries, in Italy, Germany, Belgium, and Netherlands, nuclear weapons, according to the ICAN, the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, the fact that they are still there and they are modernizing it this year, according to ICAN one more time, is one of the reasons why the lack of trust between Russia and European countries is so high these years. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And the gentleman in the front row here?
Yeah, I'm ex-permanent representative of Kazakhstan to CTBTO, and I would like to thank first GlobSec, entire diplomatic forum, as well as our distinguished speakers for bringing this highly topical theme at the geopolitical conjuncture of today to discuss. I do understand why Robert told about the positive side of CTBTO and CTBT itself and the verification system, and I indeed commend all those who made it possible, and I commend your recent achievements. Thank you so much, and I would like also to thank Mustafa Kivaroglu for his knowledge bringing to us, but I'm pretty much sure that those who are taking the floor now are more or less familiar with what is the nuclear weapon. I've been to Nagasaki, but I also visited Semipalatinsk test site, and I still live with those who were affected by nuclear tests in Kazakhstan. You mentioned about 2,000 of nuclear testing within the history of humanity, and 500 almost were done on the soil of Kazakhstan. You can imagine that Japan, Kazakhstan, Algeria, some islands in the Pacific are the places where you can indeed see the devastating power of these inhuman devices. So that is why I think that this topic today, we should start not with the wonderful things that CTBTO has today, but rather that we still have, according to some statistics, 17,000 nuclear headworks, nukes. And how many times these 17,000 nukes can destroy the life on the earth? Several times. Several times. Is that humanity would tolerate further? Should we maybe come back to the good age of nuclear disarmament in the 90s, when CTBT was signed, when the START was signed? Kazakhstan is part of START as well, by the way, and we decreased, we gave up from the nuclears, we got some political commitments, guarantees, but we do see that all these guarantees probably not are in place nowadays. We saw also the good deal that Iran will keep its nuclear program under the international control, but then we lost this instrument as well. So, responsibility on youth, great, but we're losing Hibakushi. We're losing those who survived the nuclear tests in Semipalatinsk. What are the responsibility of us, our generation, who know exactly what is the devastating power of that? My question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's bring it back to the panel and then go for another round of questions as we go. So we have, how about a date for the abolition of nuclear weapons? I would add, is that feasible based on the discussion that we had? Would that make the world a safer place? Is the U.S. nuclear sharing arrangement basically part of the NPT, or what came first, right? And then what can we do to protect people from tests? Who wants to start? Robert, you want to start?
Okay. Well, I'll leave it to Bob, if I may, Sandeep's question. Very, very wise, as always. I would like to refer to the question, the second one, as to whether the nuclear sharing or nuclear umbrella or U.S. nuclear weapons that are deployed in Europe are not, against the treaty. It's neither against the letter nor the spirit of treaty. And the question was whether that is the reason for lack of trust. Well, these weapons have been there since 1960s, and since 1960s, United States and the Soviet Union have, signed a lot of arms control agreements with the presence of these U.S. nuclear weapons on Allied territory. So it cannot be singled out as one of the issues. The terminology is important because the NPT refers to possession. It prevents possession, or non-nuclear weapon states which have signed as a non-nuclear weapon state and stay and sort of promise to stay as non-nuclear for the rest of their life, and agree not to get technology that would help them and develop nuclear weapons, and they will not possess. So therefore, I don't think, well, it might be one of the issues that might come to one's mind, but it's not an issue. I would like to also mention something like regarding nuclear weapons, and there is this terminology or jargon that I keep reading and hearing lately, especially in the present situation, escalate to de-escalate. That is to raise the bar so high and to show to the world that this is the end. Do you want to go further? No, I just don't want to go further down, so let's go back. So, well, it might work with some other instruments, but I mean, it's not just, from top of my head. Based on some research and academic research, scientific research, I can tell you that out of some 55 simulations of escalate to de-escalate scenarios, only in 5, that is 10%, de-escalation work, and in the other 50 cases, things went out of control. And especially, and there's this talk about, well, tactical nuclear weapons did not have any military value, especially during the Cold War and the immediate aftermath of the Cold War period. Now, they can become an instrument to just show your determinism and to the other side by dropping a small nuclear weapon or tactical nuclear weapon and wait and see what the other side will do. How can you guarantee that the other side and things will not go escalate and go out of control again? You cannot just joke with nuclear weapons. Right. It's not any other weapon. It's just radiation. Don't forget about it.
All right. Thank you very much. Robert?
I'll be quick because I'd love to hear some questions or comments from younger people in the audience. The first question is from Sandeep about a time-bound elimination of nuclear weapons. That's a political and a technical challenge, is that you can't just eliminate them like that. It's got to be verifiable, etc. So there's some very tricky technical things, but it's probably what's more critical is the political environment to be right so that that could happen. What I'm reminded of is back in 1962, the world stared into an abyss of possible nuclear war with the Cuban Missile Crisis. That crisis begat opportunity, and in 1963, a partial test ban treaty was agreed. I hope that we're able to grab from the elevated concern that there is in this present era opportunity to make for a better world. You asked about computer simulation. Computer simulation of design of nuclear weapons is only possible, as you hinted in your question, if you've got a lot of data. Supercomputers help, but if you don't have data, you can't actually set up a simulation model that works. So there are limits to who and what can be done with computer simulation. The issue around trust and nuclear sharing, etc., I will not speculate on the basis of trust or distrust of any state player, I would just observe that trust is one of those incredibly valuable but fragile things, easily damaged, hard to build, and we should keep building it. The ambassador from Kazakhstan, former, yes, I've been to Semipalatinsk also, and the magnitude of the impact of nuclear weapons in that area is very clear. I'm sure that is part of the reason that Kazakhstan is such a strong leader on non-proliferation and disarmament, and we thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We go to our next question over here.
Sorry. All right. I'm a senior at Bilkent, econ student. So, well, you were asking about how the youth was feeling about this. Well, my feelings are, I'm not incredibly hopeful about it, given that the horizontal armament is not, there are no hopeful progression on that. Given the possibility of a nuclear winter or a possible annihilation of entire cities, nuclear weapons seems to be more for pushing some of the goals that certain states have, and they can have more pressure on pursuing those goals. So that would be my take on it, especially given certain possible accidents that could have happened in 70s. There were over a bear. There could have been a nuclear war. I mean, you guys are experts on that, and especially given right now in the presence of trade wars between U.S. and China and the rise of far right in Europe. Secondly, I just wanted to ask one thing: wouldn't it have been an efficient way to look at Iran's armament to put pressure on Israel if their disarmament would have achieved? I think that could have created more nuclear balance in the Middle East, if you will. Yeah, I mean that's. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. When I look at the watch, we're already at the time that we are allowed here. There are more questions. I encourage then the question, the people who have questions to approach maybe also the panelists after this. But in the spirit of making sure there's enough time for the next debate here, right. I'll cut it off here.
I
and
would
Mustafa,
like
please.
to
Yes.
come up with an answer, if I may, for the last
and wrap
part.
it up as
Yeah,
like
okay.
a final comment, right?
Well, I keep hearing this as to whether it wouldn't be good if Iran had nuclear weapons to balance Israeli nuclear capability, which is not declared. I mean, or there is this issue which I got as, all right. But the second strike capability rested upon the triad, nuclear submarines, and ICBMs, ground-based ICBMs, and the strategic bombardment aircraft, which would, definitely be active in case that country is attacked. And back in time, it was the United States and Soviet Union which had this triad, and now France and United Kingdom, they have nuclear submarines, etc. So, and the situation was between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was kind of bilateral situation. And even China's nuclear capability was not very much part of the picture. And, but if and when, which Iranians always say their nuclear capabilities for peaceful purpose, which is something that should be verified and we should definitely believe in. But if another country acquires nuclear weapons in the region, it will not be the last. This is what most experts think. That will provide or cause a cascade of proliferation in the region. and some countries are mentioned, which I would not like to mention right here. So therefore, I mean, it is better if no country, no additional country acquires nuclear weapons, and even better if existing countries
to
can
give
get
up.
rid of their nuclear weapons. That should be the last sort of point.
Great. That's a good point to end on. Robert?
Very quickly, I'm encouraged to hear you wrestling with these tough issues. They're difficult. And you mentioned that you weren't particularly hopeful about certain things. I say to you, never give up. Never give up, because we must maintain hope and continue to work towards a better world, because once we put the white flag up on hope, then we do lose all. So important that we continue to look as to how we can move forward in difficult times. Can I just finish with a quote from, it was in December last year, the Minister for Interior from Bahrain, some of you might know him, a very experienced, senior, sagely leader. And he said to me, "What is in your hands, you must protect it." And he's so right. Is that we must look at what's in our hands, even if it's imperfect, but still valuable, and we must protect it. So to my encouragement to all in this room, whether you're journalists, diplomats, experts, look at what's in our hands, and let's seek to protect that, and then maintain hope to build for a better future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And no concluding remarks from me. Just join me, please, in thanking the panelists in the great discussion. And I hope you're properly warmed up. Thank you very much, gentlemen.